A very good morning to you and welcome to a new update video on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So, what happened yesterday? You experienced it with me live during the stream yesterday. There was actually an attack during the live stream by Iran on US bases in Qatar. The entire airspace was also closed off, but Bitcoin actually reacted quite positively to this. So, we also experienced this live on the stream. There was a brief sell-off before the news even broke. That means maybe some insiders already knew more, but after the attack was actually carried out, Bitcoin just started pumping. Over the course of the night, we even saw a recovery of about 6.3%, which was ultimately triggered by news from Donald Trump, because Donald Trump posted 6 hours ago that a ceasefire between Israel and Iran was being arranged, supposedly within the next 6 hours. However, 3 hours ago, the Iranian foreign minister confirmed that this is not the case and made it clear that Israel fired the rockets at Iraq, not the other way around. And there is no ceasefire agreement. However, if Israel stops its attacks against Iran by 4 o'clock in the morning Tehran time, then there would be a possibility to talk about a ceasefire. At the moment, however, as I see it now, Israel has just issued warnings, which means new rockets are being fired at Israel. And so, at the moment, it really does seem that there is no ceasefire. Netanyahu has also not commented on this ceasefire so far. That means, unfortunately, what Donald Trump posted here could not be confirmed. In any case, Donald Trump would now be ready to make peace despite this attack on the US bases, because he also said in a post that he thanks Iran for the attack being a weak one. Not only that, he also respects the fact that Iran warned the USA beforehand. So, what happens next if we take a look at this? We just had an incredible pump with Bitcoin, yes, up to 116,000 US dollars. You have to imagine, yesterday we were at 99,550 US dollars. And during the attack it kept going. And we just saw a recovery all the way up to 106,000 US dollars. Currently there's a small correction. We'll see how things develop from here. I've drawn a few things here. Where do I see a possibility for how the price could move next? That we might see another small top here and then see lower prices again afterwards. That would be the first possibility I see right now. Because at this point we really don't know how the market will develop. And the pump that happened here overnight, triggered by Donald Trump's announcement, actually took place outside of regular trading hours. This means if we look at the liquidation heat map, we see new long liquidations here, which would also be very interesting for the market to trigger. But we also have a huge cluster up to around $170,000 where highly leveraged positions are located, which of course the market maker would also love to take out. We can see up to $170,000 where that is. We're actually right there again. You can see in that area, if I switch to the 1 hour chart, it's located directly in the price range of my key level. That's $106,500 to $107,193, which would fit exactly into this price range here, so that everything could be liquidated. But that's not all, because if we zoom out a bit, we also have this descending resistance above us, which would fall exactly into this price range. That's why the possibilities I see now are actually that we might go up a bit more here, or even test this trend again and then see lower prices afterwards. Or, depending on what the market maker decides to do today, this vector candle we have, this long candle I can activate it here, this light green candle. These are candles that often tend to get revisited, which is why I've marked this price area here with this small block to indicate that we have an opportunity for a long position here in order to see higher prices again. Then we would simply continue this bullish price structure that we've currently built up. There would be a larger correction here, but then we could actually end up roughly in this price area. And at that point, I would really wait to see what happens, especially as we observe how things develop with the cluster. Because right now, if we look at it on a 3-day basis, there's not much liquidation above us. If we look at the liquidation heat map on a 1-day basis, it's this cluster here that has formed. Let's take another look at the 12-hour chart. And here too we have another comparison. That's exactly what I mean. Here is this price range that has accumulated in a short period of time, where I see a possibility for the next potential resistance, which would also fit with the liquidation map. This would be the price range in the 1-day chart, but in the 1-week liquidation map, it's exactly this cluster I was talking about. In the meantime, I have also taken partial profits or realized profits from my positions. You can see here yesterday I actually closed the Bitcoin position at around 103,100. Why did I do that? I can show you that as well. We had the CME gap And this CME gap, after my live stream yesterday, we were exactly in that price range. I even posted about it, we almost closed it. And on Bitget, I actually closed my entire position and took profits. But I also still have an open position on Bitunix, and I partially realized profits there at around 103,740. Why did I partially realize this position? So now I've taken out $100 and there's still about 120 in profit left in it. That was a $5,000 position. Now there's 2,500 left. But it's ready to be scaled up if we actually drop down to around 2,800. Let's also go through another chart. What was the reason I closed my position here? That also had something to do with the liquidation heat map. I even talked about it during the live video. So here, as we can see in the 3-day chart, there was a large cluster of liquidations that built up here. And that was my price target for taking partial profits. This time on Bitunix. That's why we'll now see when we compare the smaller time frames with the liquidation zones, whether I scale in here or maybe even lower, where we say there's still this price area we could potentially reach. But before that, I'll let the market decide how the next moves play out and then react accordingly. If we take a look at all of this with Ethereum, I also see a possibility with Ethereum, should we drop again purely from a Fibonacci technical perspective, that there would be a new entry opportunity between $2,300 and $2,270 in case we actually correct downward here. What would also support the scenario for Ethereum? Here as well, the 12-hour liquidation heat map shows that between $2,320 and below, we have a large number of liquidations, specifically long liquidations based on the last 12 hours. But what we absolutely should also pay attention to with Ethereum, the 1-week liquidation map, you can see here that up to around $2,580, we have an incredible amount of short liquidations, and there are even large clusters in this price range at $2,569, where a total of $724 million has actually accumulated. And even if you look at the comparison, long liquidations are at about $655 million, while we have nearly $1.22 billion in short liquidations above us. That's why it would of course be very interesting here as well for the price of Ethereum to pump and actually trigger all these liquidations. On the chart, that would be roughly this price range, this cluster, even a bit above this key zone that we have, in fact, this supply zone that has gradually formed. That's why things remain exciting here as well. Will we manage to break above it? Will we perhaps see a rejection beforehand so that we can really get a new entry here? Because we actually had a very, very strong pump upwards. And if we look at the news from yesterday, Ethereum was able to achieve an 11.4% price increase due to Iran's attack on the USA. So actually, it's a completely opposite development from what you would normally expect from the market. Here, I'm also waiting to see how the market continues to react. Maybe at the market opening, you can also see here we had a small cluster, in this case, roughly this price range, where we had a consolidation. Now you can see that on the 1-hour chart, we might even see this price range a bit more clearly on the 15-minute chart. But here too, we now have support on the lower end. If I now draw this line here, which is currently our support, this red line here currently shows us roughly a support level that we are holding. But it remains exciting here to see whether we move above this cluster or if we get rejected again and take another breather. That could happen in this price range, but also in this price range. Here too, we of course have a long vector candle on the 15-minute chart, which also tends to get filled again. That means don't ignore it. This price range here might be interesting on a short time frame. If we look at it on the 5-minute chart, we could find support here again and actually continue to rise. But for now, it simply means letting the market act so that we can respond to it later with a clear view. I'll see, maybe I'll go live again today and then there will be an update. Very briefly, to wrap up, let's look at Solana and XLP. We see that Solana has broken through this important level to the upside again, but is now in a continued downward trend channel here. You can also see that yesterday with this low it was reached perfectly. This means that if we actually see this over longer time frames and have a bit of patience here, we could have a wonderful breakout from this downward trend channel, which could look something like this. At some point we break above it, maybe have a brief retest, and then finally see higher prices again. This means that the $187 would be possible, but we should also pay attention to this level here, where we also retested this high, and then see how the market continues to react. XLP, basically the same pattern if we take a closer look. Here too we have a large downward trend channel. At least we had a resistance here, as you can see. It then became a support for a long time, and within this support trend line, a resistance line has now formed up here as well. And here too, we now have this downward trend channel, and it's the same story as with Solana. Here, we could see a breakout to the upside and finally see higher prices again. Because XLP has actually been consolidating for a very, very long time now without any major moves. And even yesterday, it took a bit longer to recover a little. Alright, that's it for now. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'd also appreciate a few comments. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.